6. What do you say? It's a long chapter 2, though. But. Now after these things, Jesus went away to the other side of Galilee. Now, when he says after these things, remember, he was up in Jerusalem, or down in Jerusalem, at the feast. So, if you remember my instant map of the Holy Land here, Jesus was down here, and he traveled up, and he came over to this area here. When they talk about the other side of the sea, they're talking about the Sea of Galilee up there. To the other side of the Sea of Galilee. And a great number of people were following him because they were seeing all the signs which he was performing, especially on those who were sick. And Jesus went up on the mountain, and he sat there with his disciples. The mountain would probably be the Golan Heights over here, okay? These were, today we call them the Golan Heights, but they're cliffs, and they fall down. This side of the sea is a gentle sloping down to the sea, like the beach in Florida. But this side, it was like up to the cliffs, and then down, straight down. So that's the difference between the typography of those two lands. Of those two sides of the lake. Jesus went up to the mountain and he sat down with his disciples. Now, the Passover, or the feast of the Jews, was at hand. So Jesus, therefore, lifting up his eyes and seeing that a great multitude had been coming to him, turned to Philip and said, "Where are we to buy bread that all of these may eat?" Now, Jesus was saying this in order that he could test him, for he knew himself what he was intending to do. And Philip answered Jesus, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be sufficient for everyone to even receive a little. One of the disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a small child here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what is this for so many people?" Jesus commanded his disciples, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in that place. So the men sat down, and they numbered about 5,000. Jesus therefore took the loaves, and having given thanks to his Father, he distributed to those who were seated. Likewise also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when everyone was filled, he said to his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up, and they filled 12 full baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves which are left over by those who had eaten. When therefore the people saw the sign which he had performed, they said, "This is of a truth that the prophet who has come into the world." And Jesus, therefore, perceiving that they were intending to come and take him by force to make him king, withdrew again to the mountain by himself alone. Now when evening came, his disciples went down to the sea, and after getting into a boat, they started to cross the sea to Capernaum, back over here on the other side of the lake. So they have to row about 5 miles or so, get over there, 6 miles. Get into the boat to come to Capernaum. And it had already become dark, and Jesus had not yet come to them. And the sea began to be stirred up because of strong winds that were blowing. And when therefore they rowed about 3 or 4 miles, they beheld Jesus walking upon the sea and drawing near to the boat. And they were greatly afraid. And he said to them, "It is I, do not be afraid." They were willing, therefore, to receive him into the boat, and immediately the boat was at land, to which they were going. Now the next day the multitude that stood on the other side of the sea saw that there was no other small boats here except one, and that Jesus had not entered with his disciples into the boat, but that his disciples had gone away alone without him. And there came other small boats from Tiberias near the place where they ate the bread, after the Lord had given thanks. Now when the multitude therefore saw that Jesus was not there, nor his disciples, they themselves all got into small boats and came to Capernaum to seek Jesus. And when they found him on the other side of the sea, they said to him, "Rabbi, when did you get here?" And Jesus answered them, saying, now pay attention to this, because you're going to see a few of these. Truly, truly, I say to you, you seek me not because you saw great signs, but because you ate the loaves and you were filled. Do not work for food that perishes, but for the food which endures unto eternal life, which the Son of Man shall give to you. For on him the Father, even God, has set his seal. And they therefore said to him, what shall we do that we may work the works of God? And Jesus answered and said to them, this is the work of God, that you believe in him who he has sent. And they therefore asked Jesus, What then do you do for a sign that we may see and believe in you? What works will you perform? For our fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, as it was written, he gave them bread out of heaven to eat. And Jesus answered them a second time, saying, truly, truly, I say to you, it is not Moses who has given you the bread out of heaven, but it is my Father who gives you the true bread out of heaven. For the bread of God is not that which comes down out of heaven and gives life to the world. They therefore said to him, Lord, give us evermore this bread. And Jesus said to them, I am this bread of life. He who comes to me shall not hunger, and he who believes in me shall never thirst. But I said to you that you have seen me, and yet you do not believe. For all that the Father gives me shall come to me, and the one who comes to me I will never cast out. For I have come down from heaven, not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. And this is the will of him who sent me, that of all that he has given me, that I should lose nothing, but raise it up upon the last day. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who beholds the Son and believes in him may have eternal life, and I myself will raise him up on that last day. Now the Jews therefore were grumbling about Jesus, because he had said, I am the bread that came down from heaven. And they were saying, is this not Jesus, the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we all know? How does he now say, I have come down out of heaven? And Jesus answered and said to them, why do you grumble amongst yourselves? No one can come to me unless the Father who sent me draws him, and I shall raise him up on the last day. That's the third time he said that. Pay attention to that. For it is written in the prophets that they shall be taught, all be taught. That's important too. It is written in the prophets that they shall all be taught of God. Everyone who has heard and learned from the Father comes unto me. Not that any man has seen the Father, except the one who is from God. He has seen the Father. For here it goes again. Truly, truly, I say to you, he who will believe has eternal life. For I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate manna in the wilderness, and yet they died. This is the bread which comes down out of heaven, so that no one, that anyone that eats of it will not die. For I am the living bread that came down out of heaven, and if anyone eats this bread, he shall live forever. And the bread also which I give for the life of the world is my own flesh. The Jews therefore began to argue with one another, saying, how can this man give his own flesh for us to eat? Jesus therefore said to them, number 5, truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in yourself at all. For he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. For my flesh is the true food, and my blood is the true drink. And he who eats my flesh and drinks my blood and abides in me, and I am in him. As the living Father sent me, and I live because of the Father, so he who eats me shall also live because of me. For this is the bread which came down out of heaven, not as the fathers ate, for they all died. But he who eats this bread shall live forever. These things he said in the synagogue as he taught in Capernaum. Therefore many of his disciples, when they heard this teaching, said, this is too difficult of a statement. Who can listen to this? But Jesus, conscious that his disciples also grumbled at this, said to them, "Will this cause you all to stumble as well? What then, if you should behold the Son of Man ascending where he was before? It is the Spirit who gives life. The flesh profits nothing. The words that I have spoken to you are of spirit and of life. But there are some here of you who do not believe." For Jesus knew from the beginning that who they were that did not believe, and who it was that would eventually betray him. And he was saying, "For this reason I have said to you that no one can come unto me unless it had been granted him from the Father." Now, as a result of this teaching, many disciples withdrew and would not walk with Jesus anymore. Jesus therefore turned to the 12 and asked them, "You do not want to go away also, do you?" And Simon Peter answered him, "Lord, to whom should we go? For you have the words of life. And we have believed and have come to know that you are the Holy One of God." And Jesus answered them, "Did I myself not choose you, the 12? And yet one of you is a devil." Now he was meaning Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, for he, one of the 12, was going to betray him. What strikes you about this passage? Two things should strike you immediately. If not, I can hit you with this Windex and that will hit you immediately. One way or another, we get your attention.
Well, he says over and over again, it's through me. You've got to come through me.
5 times. You know, in Hebrew, they don't have real inflective type speech, so what they do to add emphasis sometimes is to repeat it once or twice. If I said, "Truly, Sandy, I'm telling you the truth," basically. "Truly I say to you, if you sit on that chair, you will be more comfortable than if you stand in this corner." And you say, "Well, I don't know. The chair might not hold me because I weigh 400 pounds. Well, I can look at you and say, "I assure you that that chair, truly, truly, I say to you." Okay, the truly is me yelling at you. "Hey, Sandy, why are you standing up? Sit down over there." And you say, "Well, I don't know. The chair might not hold me, or it might be greased and I'll slip right off of it and hit the ground. Everybody will laugh at me." And if I say, "Truly, truly," it's like me grabbing your coattails and say, "Listen to me." Then I come over and plot you down in that chair and say, "Sit there, you'll be more comfortable than standing in the corner." I mean, that's how the Hebrews do inflection or to get your attention. One truly means, "Listen to me, I'm talking about something serious." 2 trulies, I mean, you're standing on the cliff of stupidity. And he's trying to grab you back before you go over. All right? 5 times he uses 2 trulies. What's he talking about?
How they doubted.
Well, no, that's a given. He knows that. Well, first of all, you should notice in this passage that there are these little markers aren't working. Can't see them. Give me a dark one. In this chapter, there is, without question, A-T-I-O-N. There are 2 conversations going on, right? So far, John has written his entire gospel this way. He is writing to the world, and by that I mean the physical world. The physical world, and he is writing from a T-U-A-L, spiritual world. And he mentions that which you see is the physical world. That which you know is the physical world. But what John is emphasizing, where all the trulies come from, are of the spiritual world. And Jesus keeps saying, you see, but you're not believing. You hear, but you're not believing. Well, what are we seeing? What are we hearing? Well, first of all, you saw 5,000 fed with 5 little biscuits and 2 little fish. 5,000. How do you do that? And that's just the men. We don't know how many ladies and children were there. Could have been another 5,000 for all I know. But the men were counted, and there was at least 5,000 of them. How many of you have done that lately? Now, I know mac and cheese goes a long way, but how many of you have fed 5,000 with a little cup, a cup of mac and cheese? Clearly a miracle. Clearly something beyond our physical rules. Our physical rules were, for a moment anyway, transcended. And you know what? We witnessed it. We participated in it, or ate. And yet we failed to understand it. In other words, this is a failure here. We failed to understand it. And interesting that the discussion is all about bread and eating and surviving and continuing, correct? And yet we failed to understand it. What does this imply? Well, it implies, as Jesus says later, God has given you the ability to see and hear and even participate in the spiritual realm, and still you lack knowledge. Lack, L-A-C-K. Still you lack knowledge, and in that lack of knowledge you cannot live. You can't live because you haven't made a decision based on what you yourself have seen and hear. You have eyes, you don't see. You have ears, you don't hear. Over and over and over again, Jesus makes this point. The spiritual realm, as Jesus presents it, is as real as me standing here teaching you right now. Jesus isn't saying, if my Father does that, or if my Father does this. He's saying, my Father did this, does that, gave to me everything I need to know. I'm giving it to you, and yet there's something breaking down here. There is a problem. And it ain't me. B-L-E-M. It ain't me, and it ain't the Father. So who is it? Well, it's over here with mankind in his physical world. How many of you believe in the solar system, the planets? The ones that we have named Mars and Venus and skip Earth. I mean, you're obviously here. I'm assuming you believe in Earth, unless, there's a real headache. Mars. Everybody believe in Mars? Anybody seen Mars? No. Have you seen pictures of Mars? Sure, NASA has them all over the place. Is it really Mars? I mean, I remember back in the 70s when the hoax was the whole moon landing thing was a Hollywood production. We didn't really go there. Even to this day, there are people who believe we never landed on the moon. And yet, with a powerful telescope, you could see all the junk up on the moon that we left there. The landing things and other things, the little stupid car. All that junk's up on the moon. We can see it, we can photograph it from this earth, and yet there are people that will not believe. In 2018, that's not right, 2008, they found the last Japanese man in a cave fighting World War II. They had interviewed him and all that. And they did a big article in Life magazine. I forget the guy's Yakamura Hukuraka or something like that. 2008. They finally found the cave that he had fixed up and had been living in since 1945 in Japan. And we got guys that don't believe anybody ever landed on the moon. What's the problem? 5,000 were fed, 5,000 witnessed, 5,000 participated, and now he's talking about being filled. If you eat with the spiritual world, that's great, and as long as you keep eating, but eventually you're going to die anyway. Even if you eat right up to the last day. There is a termination point in this earth. If you eat over in the spiritual realm, i.e. Jesus Christ, you will live forever. And this is made quite poignantly 5 times. All right, that's the promise. This is what has been discussed. This has been witnessed. And they answer. How do they answer? How do the people over here answer? The priests, the Pharisees, even the disciples themselves. Well, Lord, how can we eat your body? And if we do eat your body, there's certainly not going to be enough of it to go around to everybody. Think about it. How do we eat your body? How do we drink your blood? And Jesus answers all of their questions in spiritual sense. He says, you wouldn't even be drawn to me if it wasn't the Father's will. The Father has willed for everyone to, all, remember I emphasize that, all to know and all to have an opportunity to respond. Well, to respond to an opportunity assumes that you can see and hear it, assumes that you can participate in it, and assumes that you can understand it. Make understanding out of it. He's not talking about eating his body and blood. He's talking about coming into his kingdom now in this current physical world because Jesus is here. The prophets wrote about it, he says. Everybody wrote about it, he says. He's here in the physical world, but he is speaking and training in the spiritual world. And he's doing it as matter-of-factishly, if that's a word, I'm not sure. He's doing it as matter-of-factishly as if I told you all right now, hey, my truck's out in the parking lot. Would you doubt that? Well, Tom, show us your truck and we'll believe. Okay, I take you over the windows, I show you my truck, I give you my keys, I say, here, go out and start it if you want, it's my truck. And you come back in and I said, Zach or whatever, I need you guys to help me carry some chairs out and put them in my truck. Will you do that for me? Well, we're not sure your truck's out there, Tom. I just showed you my truck. You got my keys for crying out loud. Well, what if we get the wrong truck? This is a frustration Jesus is dealing with. Well, just give us a sign. Excuse me. What just happened? What just happened that you saw, that you ate, and now you're saying, give us a sign? I think he's yelling at the 12 guys now, not just the hundreds that were around. What just happened, fellas? And now you're over here and you're trying to understand. I understand your struggle, but come on. Give us a sign? How many cards do I got to shuffle before you'll believe it? See, this is humankind. Why? Last week we talked about, putting your hope in what? Yourself or the Lord? You or the Lord? And we did that by what? Well, we had this pond and this sick guy. And we said the problem, he had no hope or fading hope, was that he couldn't see beyond the pond. What does the pond represent? The physical world that you know, that you've always known. The physical world which you sleep in, you walk in, you breathe in, you suffer in when you hurt. The truck runs over you. Or you laugh in when you're making fun of the guy that got run over by the truck. The physical world that we know, right? You know why you're not like a cow? No idea.
I feel like a cow and fat.
You're not looking beyond the pond. Is because cows can't reason beyond themselves, as we understand. They don't have the lobes in their brains that we have in ours. I have never been to the moon, but I believe in the moon. I sit most while sometimes I look up at the full moon, and you can see that face on it so clear. That's the man in the moon. Ridiculous as that is, I've seen it a million times. And every time I go, you know how many times I've seen the sunset over the water? That's beautiful, by the way. And if it's perfect settings, you get that green flash at the very end. You ever see that? That blesses you, by the way. If you get that, God loves you. And it goes down, and it goes down, it goes down. Ships sail by in front of it. Doesn't make any difference. In fact, I got videos on my phone of that. Last time it happened. They sail right by. Oh, big old. And that big old moon's just going down. It's not really going down. It's worth spinning. But it looks like it's going down. And it goes down, and it goes down, and it goes down. And it goes down. And then finally that last little. And then finally, and if you're lucky, if the atmosphere is perfect, boom, get that little green flash, and it's gone. You know what I found out? I had to do some research. That happens every day. Whether I'm there to see it or not, it just keeps it. Every time I've seen it, everybody around cheers wildly. They do. Clapping their hands, dancing, jumping up and down, blowing horns. And you know what? It's every day. Even if it's rainy and stormy out there and you can't see nothing, it's still happening. That's in my physical world. Now, you want to know something else? And this is where I stop being a cow. Not only does it happen every day, but Tom Chanter, you know Tom Chanter, he has nothing to do with it. It happens anyway. If Tom Chanter was not on this planet, it would keep happening. If Tom Chanter got run over by a asteroid, some of the junk on the moon that re-entered Earth and got hit by it, it would happen anyway. And you know what? If you go over to Daytona, they will all gather on that thing and watch it. If you go over to Tampa, St. Pete area, they'll all gather on the dock and the shore and watch it. And when it goes down, these people, strangers over here, these people, strangers, will all cheer for it. And it happens every day. That's why we're not cows. We can leap beyond our own selves, our own physical parameters, and say, there's something bigger at play here than me. Now, Tim's a pretty strong guy, but I don't think he's doing it either. Sandy's, you guys up to anything back there? We call it physical science. The Earth is in an orbit around this bigger sun, and we explain it away with our mathematics. But you know what we can't explain is how all those items got there in the first place. Oh, there's a Big Bang Theory. Oh no, all this junk was just floating through space. Well, where did the junk come from? Don't know, but it's just floating in space. They came together at a planet, and then one day a tree, you know, dropped a pine cone, and the pine cone got in the goo, and the goo grew up and was Katie with a broken limb. Oh, we got all kinds of things to explain stuff away, don't we? And yet, well, we got a kid over here that's got 5 little barley loaves about that big and 2 little scrawny fish, which would have made a great little lunch for a kid. Explain this. Oh, well, you know how the critics do it. They say, well, everybody just felt so guilty that the little boy gave up his lunch that they all opened their coats and pulled out their lunch. Isn't that a sweet definition? The only problem was, if anybody had any lunch anywhere and the Romans saw it, they would take it. Because they were hungry too. The only difference is they had a sword, and these people didn't. I doubt very much they all pulled out their lunches. I think what happened is a lot of people were starving to death, as we know that to be true, and Jesus said, we got to feed these people. Philip, as brave as he said, well, if we had 200 denarii, we couldn't feed all these people. A denarii is about a day's wage, so you're talking, 9 months' wages. If we had 9 months' wages, we couldn't even feed these 5,000 even a little. So Jesus said, there is a world beyond ours. There is a very powerful and incredible world beyond ours. So let's just ask God to bless this and transcend our stupid little parameters, get us past the pond, and say, I am. In terms that you can understand because you saw it, you ate it. How is it you don't understand what God's trying to tell you? No, Jesus is not inviting you to eat his physical body or his physical blood, but he is willing to give all that he is so that you might taste this kingdom and know it to be true. I'm not fond of sweet potatoes. That's not a secret. And do you know why I'm not fond of sweet potatoes? It's because I have never tasted or had a sweet potato that I cared for. My parents, they loved them. Every other dinner, there it was, sitting right in front of me. You eat your food, Tommy, or you'll sit there forever. That'll be a long dang dinner in it, because I ain't eating that mess. You don't even know if you like, you just have to eat that many times. I know I don't like it. And now as a 68-year-old man, you know what? I am convinced, heart, mind, soul, body, to the very fiber of my being, the marrow of my existence, to a cellular level, that I don't like sweet potatoes. Never did. You can throw avocado in there too. Not fond of avocado. Why? Again, Dad had a huge avocado tree, and every night at dinner, there it was. Eat your avocado. I'm already on a life sentence for the potatoes, Dad. Come on, now avocado too? I'm never getting away from this table, am I? I make joke of it now, but when I was 7, that was a different ball game. I have tasted it. I have witnessed it. I have been in its presence. And there is no lack of understanding on my part how I feel about avocados and sweet potatoes. No lack of understanding whatsoever. I speak of it as matter of factishly. I know it's hot in here. I speak of it as matter of factishly. This is what Jesus is doing to give them a taste of the spiritual realm, identifying in things that they would understand. Your fathers ate of the bread in the physical realm. And regardless of the fact God provided it, they still died. Where's my die thing? Somewhere. Oh, right here. They still died. I get that. I know that. But I'm offering you a new food, which if you consume, if you eat, if you participate in, understand, and decide for, you will never die. And he references always on that day. He doesn't use that phraseology, but on that last day, I will raise you up. Throughout the rest of the gospel, you hear on that day, I will be right there. In fact, the last thing John's going to tell us at the Last Supper is, in my Father's kingdom, many mansions, all this stuff. If I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and take you there myself on that day. That's what he had in mind all along, isn't it? No, that's what God had in mind all along. Way back here in the Old Testament, when he made the promise in the first place. That's why Jesus says, I don't have anything of myself. Everything I've got, the Lord gave to me. God gave to me. And I've given it to you. I've presented it to you in ways that you can understand in your physical world. And yet somehow you are failing to make that over up here. That's what makes you a beast, a cow, an unlearned, ununderstanding, unable to jump over this stupid pond. Oh, but if you throw me in a pond, when it bubbles, I'll be healed. Jesus didn't even play with that nonsense. He said, do you want to be healed or not? The guy said, I don't have anybody put me in. Forget the pond. Do you want to be healed or not? Do you want to understand? Do you want to grow up a little bit? Jump beyond yourself? Become fully sentient? We love that word. Nobody can spell it. But it means just this. The ability to leap beyond yourself. Well, to do that, first and foremost, you gotta know yourself. You've got to know there's a greater destination, and you've got to want or develop a need or decide that you want to be a part of it. Then you take your first step in the right direction. And Jesus says, if you know all that, you won't need a sign. And yet to the end of his ministry, even though they plan to kill him, they still demand a sign, even on the cross. He's dying, and the priests are saying, let's see if Elijah will come and save him. That will be a sign, and we will all believe. Oh yeah, God really wants you now, doesn't he? As you watch his son dying on the cross. And he cried out, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani. And they thought he was calling for Elijah. Failed to understand the greater glory here. They were still waiting for Elijah to come. Do you know now, even today, this very day, Passover, amongst all the Jews, even the Orthodox, they set an empty chair for Elijah. If there's 12 people going to participate in this Seder meal, there will be 13 chairs. And the 13th chair will have a silver mug, and the silver mug will be filled with the finest wine. And in 2023 years, no one has ever drank from that mug. Nor will they ever. Elijah's in the spiritual realm. Jesus is in the spiritual realm. The apostles are in the spiritual realm. Elijah ain't coming to dinner. He's already come in the person of John the Baptist. Jesus marked him. God marked him. The scriptures marked him. He's come and gone. You're set in a place for no one. Why? Because they can't see beyond the pond. How is it, Nicodemus, you are a leader of the Jews? Not just a leader, the instructor of the Jews, and you can't understand this. See, John's writing two conversations. One acknowledging who and where he is at the moment, but another acknowledging who and where he was previously. See, the greatest gift God gave John is he saw it. And to him now it is matter-of-factishly. You wonder why John writes so much matter-of-factishly when concerning Jesus in the spiritual realm? Because John has the same mind as Jesus does now. I've seen it. And if you ask me, Tom, are you sure you don't like sweet potatoes? Oh yeah, I'm sure. I taste them. And you can't camouflage it. That's what you have here. This is the power of this verse. The power of the truly trulies. He's not emphasizing communion or any of that stuff. He's emphasizing the fact that you can't understand it. I put a cow right here in the middle of the room and you go, oh, I don't see any cow. You touch the cow, you pet the cow, you feed the cow, and still you say, there was no cow in that classroom. Jesus will say it later in this very gospel. You were sad, so we sang a dirge for you, but you did not mourn. You were happy, so we played a flute for you, but you did not dance. A to Z, we've done everything we can, and yet you still won't respond. What's left? You watched me die on this bloody cross, and you still waited for Elijah. 2023 years later, your children's 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 are still waiting for Elijah. Who will never come. He's already been. Matter of fact. John's writing matter of fact in both situations. Now, how John did that? I think he got a heads up that we didn't get. But that doesn't make it any less real. In fact, I thank God for John. Because now I can think this in terms of matter of fact. And do you know how I know? Because tonight, when the sun goes down, it'll go all the way down. People will gather on both beaches to watch it. And they will cheer. Because our planet goes around in a circle. And they think something greater than them is here. Well, they're right a little bit. Something is greater than them here. We call it a sun and a planet, but if you go back beyond the sun and the planet, there's got to be something behind that. In the beginning was God. That's how John started his gospel. And the Word was God, was with God, and the Word was God. And that Word became physical and dwelt amongst us to tell us of another place. Believe it or don't. Not only that, but to give us a ticket and a passage and a guaranteed route to get to that other place. All you have to do is just this, jump over this pond. All right, that's 5. I mean, that's 6. 7's going to get a little worse here. He's going to get a little more frustrated. This is what Jesus is talking about. No, he wasn't going to have everybody take a bite out of his arm. But the heavenly food he gives is vital. And he will prove that by the fact he will end his physical existence under the control of man's hand and into the hands of the living God, which he knows is there anyway. 100%. And you will witness it, and the Jews will participate in it, and all of them will fail to understand it, save one. And that would be John at Calvary. He will not have entered heaven yet, but he was there to watch a Savior die and come back to life. Chapter 6, folks. Next week we'll do 7. Okay, and it will get a little stickier.